So that's the thing, Krystal. You look at this, 9% in the middle of a crisis. That's insane. Everybody was like,
that was like at the lowest point, though. I mean, during the day,
then it got to 30.
During
which is
the
still
day,
less than
it was
natural
at 35%. I just think it's sort of selective. And also,
I mean, in the middle of the crisis is when it matters.
There was a lot of almost like cheerleading for the right for the power grid to fail.
I don't want it to fail.
I know.
Yeah.
It didn't. So ultimately, what they did worked. They asked for voluntary reductions. There were no statewide mandates. They actually sent out a text message to people saying like, there's strain on the grid. Can you cut back on your electricity usage? People did.
But that's the only thing that saved
voluntarily.
Yeah, but
it worked.
It shouldn't have to be that way.
It worked. So people coming together in like solidarity and voluntarily cutting back.
If you have to keep your house at 80 degrees in the middle of a 100-degree heat wave,
but Saagar, it wasn't a 100-degree heat wave. This is literally the worst heat wave in California history. So I also think you're sort of bearing the lead here, which is the way that the climate crisis has created massive strain and pressure on the grid system. And that's exactly what they are trying with their renewable portfolio standard to roll back. I also think you're ignoring the way that people are changing their minds in real time about nuclear. I mean, you mentioned the fact that Newsom just signed this bill
saving Diablo for 2 more years.
Diablo, yeah. So, I mean, okay, they're changing their mind. They're doing the thing that you want them to do. So encourage them in that direction. I agree. Nuclear should be part of the solution. We have no other choice. Falling back on natural gas is not a good direction to go in. But, 35% from primarily solar and from battery storage. The grid didn't fail. You didn't have blackouts. You didn't have brownouts. You had some limited outages in very selective areas. But overall, their approach actually worked. So I don't know. I feel like you're sort of missing the bigger picture that the real problem here is the climate crisis, which is exactly what their renewable portfolio is designed to try to combat. And on the other hand, Texas, which has taken this like total free market, go oil and gas approach, when they had their extreme weather situation, 2 winters back?
2 winters ago.
Theirs completely collapsed and failed.
So the Texas grid failed for corruption reasons and for free market reasons. So, and listen, I mean, there ain't no defender here of the Texas grid, and they also burn a shit ton of coal, which is also terrible. I'm no defense of what's going on there. But when 70% of your grid has to be powered by natural gas and you spend tens of billions of dollars and you have to live in a hot state and heat your home to 78 degrees, that's not winning. That's not surviving. That's not thriving.
During the
I don't think that
literal worst heat wave in history.
California, the United States could go to net zero carbon and there would still be at least a 2°C warming of the planet. Heat and extreme heat is here to stay forever.
But the whole idea
what are we going to do about it?
Right. Yeah. What are we going to do about it? The whole idea is that California, as we pointed out before, they tend to be leaders in terms of policy that succeeds there, does get exported across the country.
But it's not success.
So if it is success, if you are in the middle of a historic heat wave and you're able to not have blackouts like Texas had during their winter storm, you're able to transition to renewables. They're moving in the direction of nuclear. The even sort of like climate-minded people there are starting to embrace nuclear. So like, it seems to me like they're going in the right direction. Is it perfect yet? No, of course not. They're still, having to rely on natural gas. You still have this like strain during a crisis. Obviously, we haven't done what it takes from a national or global perspective to get the climate crisis under control so that we can deal with these things. But to me, the bigger story here is the strain on not just California's grid, but everybody's grid because of the climate crisis and the necessity of dealing with that in a serious way, which is what they seem to be trying to do.
I don't think it's a serious way, which is that any reliance on fake battery power, which you can't rely on in a crisis, is not reliable. I mean, additionally, I'm just not going to let this go. If you can't charge an electric car in the middle of the day with heat waves, which are incredibly likely to continue for at least 100 or so more years on the planet, that's not reliable. That's not, something that you can institute. And you need, look, saving a Diablo for 2 more years before natural gas price drops is not a victory. I'm not saying it isn't a good step in the right direction, but it takes 10 years to make a nuclear power plant even come online. We have to start investing in these things today.
But
and
it seems
these things are not just going to go away.
You're unable to take a victory on nuclear when it's given. So this is a victory on nuclear. It represents, even though, yes, it's not enough, they should do a lot more, et cetera, et cetera. It represents a change in mindset that, you're right, has been infecting the green movement for too many years when nuclear was totally off the table. Same thing with the Inflation Reduction Act. I mean, the fact that nuclear was included in that is a huge, significant shift. So I just would say, why don't we celebrate the victories here and the fact that there does seem to be a real shift, not just here, but also in Europe and Germany, where there's been a change of mind about nuclear, where they were going to decommission all the plants. And now they're like, yeah, we're not going to do that yet because of exigencies with Russia. And we see what's going on the ground, and this is the direction we have to go in. So it seems to me like there's a real shift happening in real time. And ultimately, again, the grid didn't fail. They got through it. People, got the text message say, okay, well, there are some things that I can unplug or whatever. No big deal to deal with a historic first in a lifetime heat wave. So it seems to me like ultimately what they did kind of worked.
I'll tell you this, if they spend $1 on a brand new nuclear power plant, I'll do an entire monologue and saying Gavin Newsom should run for president. But I know that's not gonna happen. It's not. They're still committed to this solar idiocy. They would rather buy solar from China and pretend that batteries are just gonna magically appear that power the grid. And then, again, I'll just come back to this. If it's 100 and something degrees outside and my house is at 80, that's not a victory. That's actually, for old people, that's actually nearly a matter of life and death. They actually even point to that. In 1955, a bunch of people died in California because the power grid failed. So in the future, if you're gonna have hydro, solar, and wind, which is what all their money is being spent on, then you're actually heading to even more of these, because also the fact that they even have to back up on natural gas, they wanna get away from that. They wanna put the entire grid on solar. That's not gonna work, especially in the middle of this crisis. Part of the reason why that they even had this is because they didn't even update their natural gas-fired plants. If they, just like Texas, once again, for everybody who's out there said, Texas, I agree with you. The Texas people are idiots. Free marketeerism and all of this, letting power just float in the city of Houston and all of that, lack of weatherization, lack of infrastructure. I am just as against that as I am against this. We need actual smart planning. Natural gas, not going anywhere. Clearly, you need to update the plant. And then for future power, it should not be unreliable. That's the point that I'm making. With solar, with hydro, with all this. Even 35% for the amount of money that they spent is pathetic.
But again, this is during the most extreme conditions that they have literally faced.
But that's just going to continue.
History.
We know that. I accept your framing of the
climate.
climate.
There are plenty of days where actually they are able to meet all of their energy demands using renewables, which I think is quite extraordinary.
They hit it one time at 97% at night.
They should continue to move in the direction of nuclear. I completely encourage that direction. I think that, incidents like this show that it's essential. But I also think woke green ideology, et cetera, these are the people trying to deal with the climate crisis that is creating the strain to start with. So to me, it's missing the bigger picture of the situation that we have put ourselves in by continuing down the path of fossil fuels, by being obsessed with drilling over trying to seriously grapple with the situation the planet is facing right now.
I just think that, look, first of all, no state on earth as big as California is can do a damn thing about it. Again, the US could literally go to zero and it still wouldn't do anything. So unless we're literally willing to basically transform
so nihilistic. Then why have nuclear at all? Just drill, baby, drill. That's
look, the planet's warming, and it's just not gonna change.
Yeah, but you can mitigate the damage. That's the whole thing. I'm just not into this climate doomerism of, oh my God, there's nothing we can do. California is a gigantic economy. It's the size of Germany, a lot of countries around the world. And they have been, in the past, a leader in terms of where our national policy ultimately goes. So if you have that state moving in the direction of renewable energy, and yes, we should encourage them to do better, encourage them to embrace nuclear, all of those things, that's a positive development, because the U.S. continues to be one of the largest emitters on the planet. Certainly, if you look over the course of our history, we are the largest emitter on the planet. So, of course, there are things that we can do. I'm not willing to just throw my hands up and accept our fate of death and destruction and endless warming. There are things we can do. California's doing some of them. They need to do more of them. And ultimately, they were able to get through this crisis, which was a historic one and the worst in history in terms of heat waves, without having blackouts. And I think that constitutes a success.
We'll see how it fares for the rest of September.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.